quick acknowledgement to country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Engage Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. I can see the chat going. I'm really glad everyone's kind of saying hi. So welcome everyone. I'm going to pass on to our amazing author team. They're going to take you through today's webinar today. So I will first pass on to Laurel, who's going to kickstart this today. And then, yeah, so I'm glad everyone was here. Sorry, Laurel, you're on mute.
Sorry.
There we go.
Now we can start. So thanks everyone for joining us today. It's really great that you could be here. We do look forward to sharing the features of this new edition of Food Solutions of both textbooks with you this afternoon. Glenis, Heather and I are really delighted to be able to welcome two new members of our writing team, so Belinda Page and Melanie Ranieri. So we're very excited to have them with us. We are all very experienced teachers and hope our experience and passion for teaching comes through in these new editions of Food Solutions. The extensive evidence-based research that we've undertaken has underpinned all aspects of our study. Thanks, Susanna. Next slide, please. Hopefully you will have found time to read through the revised study design and be familiar with the many key changes in the study. So we do encourage you to read the entire study design in full so that you become familiar with the many changes that are contained in the new study. One of the key changes that you will have observed is the introduction of the key concepts, and Belinda will discuss these in detail a little bit later. The 4 units of study have the same titles and are similar in many respects to the current study, but there are some significant changes to the introduction, the outcome statements and the key knowledge and skills in almost every unit. So you will need to ensure you become familiar with the new language of each of these. In the following slides, I'll go through the major changes to the key knowledge and the keys in each of the units and areas of study, but please note that you will need to familiarise yourself with the changes to the corresponding key skill. So while we've focused on the key knowledge, we haven't actually given you the changes to the key skills, but they do accompany those key knowledge. Next slide, please, Susanna. There's in Unit 1, Outcome 1, there is not a lot of change to this outcome. You'll notice that there is the inclusion of oil in the patterns of global spread in the food production and trade. And so we have got significant information in the Unit 1 and 2 book in relation to that. And also the implications for health has been added to the effect of industrialisation, technology and globalisation. In area of study 2 in Unit 1, the study does specify the characteristics and consumption of food among Victoria's first peoples prior to European settlement. And we've included a range of examples relevant to Victoria, but we think it's important to appreciate that Australia's First Nations people would not have recognised the state boundaries as they exist today, and that many clan members would have spanned these state borders. So it's also evident that many of the foods, flavourings, tools and equipment used by First Nations people were commonly found across the continent. Sorry, Susanna, next slide, please. Thank you. There are, in Unit 2, Area Study 1, there are some significant changes to the wording of these key knowledge and the key skills in this area of study. This area of study, so you will need to read this fairly carefully, and I won't bore you by going through each one of them now, but one of the key things to notice is the concept. This area of study introduces the concept of food security and food sovereignty. And also note that qualitative and quantitative measures used to evaluate food has moved into this area of study from Unit 2 Outcome 2. So there's a significant change there. And the other thing to note here in this area study in the past, we've taught about the Food Standards Code, but that has been removed from the study, so that's no longer something that we will need to teach and students will need to understand. Next slide, thanks, Susanna. Now, in Unit 2, Area Study 2, there's not a lot of change to many of the key knowledge and skills, only minor changes to the wording, as you can see on the screen. But the key change that you will notice in this area of study is that in this outcome, we can see the move that there is a move of the key knowledge relating to the principles of heat transfer and cooking techniques and the functional properties of food. Now, these have moved from Unit 3 Outcome 1 to Unit 2 Outcome 2. What you will notice when you get your copy of Unit 1 and 2 text is that we've actually positioned the key knowledge relating to these 2 points to earlier on in this area of study in the textbook, so that students actually have the opportunity to develop their understanding of this critical information and can apply it in their applied practical activities. So we thought that was really important, but that is a significant change in the study. Next slide, please, Susanna. In Unit 3, Area Study 1, we've provided significant information about the accessory organs that are related to the digestion of food. So there will be significant information in the text about the role of the tongue, the saliva glands, pancreas, etc., in the process of digestion. So students can feel confident that that's been well covered. What I think it's important to note is that students only need to focus on the digestion and absorption and utilisation of the macronutrients. So that's carbohydrates, including dietary fibre, fat and protein. Now, these are not specified in the actual key knowledge, but they are identified in the introduction to Area Study 1, the science of food. So you do need to read the introduction to each area of study as well as the key knowledge and skills. Thanks, Susanna. One very important new aspect that's been added to this area of study is the role of diet in influencing gut microbiota. We've provided quite significant new information about this in the text and the way in which gut microbiota is related to physical and mental health. So you will find that there's quite a significant amount of information there for students and for you to familiarise yourself with that new information. So hopefully you'll feel confident in teaching that new area, that new key knowledge in this area of study. Also be aware that students must develop an understanding of the principles of research in the development of the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating as well as the Australian Dietary Guidelines. So that's something that's in this area of study too. Thanks, Susanna. In Unit 3, Area Study 1, there's some other minor changing to the wording in this area of study, but one of the things to note is that students now have to understand or to appreciate have an understanding of the symptoms, causes and management of FODMAP intolerances, along with the other allergies and intolerances that are identified by the Australian Food Standards Code. And we have provided detailed information in the text on FODMAP and all of the other food intolerances and food allergies for you. Thanks, Susanna. In Area Study 2, Outcome 2, there has been, again, some change to the key knowledge and skills. Two of the important things here is to look at the role of food in influencing mental health, so that we've covered that in depth for you. And the other important point, which is something which was new to the study, is the political influences on the food system. But we have done significant research into both of these areas of study, so we feel quite confident you will be able to address these with your students quite thoroughly. Thanks, Susanna. Now, Unit 4, Area of Study 1, what is important to note here is that there has been a change in order between Area of Study 1 and Area of Study 2 from what you have been teaching in the past. So now the current Area of Study 1 focuses on analysing food information by applying the principles of evidence-based research and healthy eating. So that's changed from the current study. Also note that, sorry, Susanna, just back for 1 second, thank you. Just also note that the information about the compulsory and optimal information on food labels is no longer contained in the study, so you do not need to teach that anymore. Thanks, Susanna. What you will notice, one of the key things about Unit 4, Area of Study 2, Outcome 2, is that you'll note that the first key knowledge point in this unit refers to the key issues of the challenge of adequately feeding a rising world population, with particular focus on proposed solutions to global food insecurity. Similarly, the key skill states that students should describe global food security and explain possible pathways to achieving food security. Now, there's been much discussion about the interpretation of this key knowledge and key skills, as although Australian issues is not identified in the key knowledge or key skill, it is stated on page 10 of the study design. As a result, we've recently been in conversation with the VCEE to clarify this concern. The outcome of this discussion is that the VCEE has stated that global food security must be seen through an Australian lens, and that students must use examples of issues of food security that are related to the Australian context. And as you'll be aware, you will have received a draft copy of Chapter 10 already. However, as a result of the clarification we've just received in the last few days from the VCEE, we're currently in the process of reviewing this chapter, and we really want to reassure you that the final textbook will focus on solutions to global food security that are related to the Australian context. So be reassured that there will be a lot of examples there that you'll be able to use and that your students will feel confident in applying either in their own coursework or in an examination context. The key concept of food security, food sovereignty and food citizenship really must be integrated across the study, but the focus in Unit 4 Outcome 2 is really on the relationship between these three concepts. So that is really asking us to consider, how does food sovereignty and food citizenship relate to food security? So again, we've really tried to ensure that that's well covered. The other major important thing to note in this area study is the inclusion of the term socio-cultural when it is related to ethical concerns of Australian food consumers. And we've really provided a wide range of examples in the text to clarify this issue for students. So I think those are the main issues. And what I would really encourage you to do again is to really put the 2023 to 2027 edition of the Food Studies study design on your holiday reading list. It mightn't be the preferred thing that you'd really like to be reading these holidays, but it really is very important. I'm not sure whether the weather will allow you to relax by the pool while you're doing that, unless, of course, you're like Belinda in a much warmer climate, but perhaps a few hot coffees might see you through. So good luck, everyone, and I'll pass over to Belinda.
Thanks, Laurel. Okay, Susanna, can we have the next slide? Great. So I'm going to talk about the cross-study specifications, and it's certainly something that we'll need to get our head around. They're found on page 9 of the study design, and we need to consider when we're developing our program how to consider the concepts in terms of how the students will then need to apply the concepts in questions, when they're discussing or debating issues, when they're interpreting information, when they're analysing and evaluating data. They're not to be taught independently, but they're taught and integrated along each of the 4 units. So it is a slightly different way that we've worked before. So I, like Laurel, would really encourage you to read those cross-study specifications quite deeply and think about how they're going to link with the key knowledge and the key skills for each unit. Thanks, Susanna. So there are 8, and we've listed them there. The first one is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island knowledge, culture and history, food citizenship, food security, food sovereignty, food systems, healthy eating, innovations in technology, issues in food and sustainability. Now, a lot of these are familiar to us, but we will just, some of them are new concepts that we will build on. So that we've built on in the textbook. So thanks, Susanna. The next one. Okay, let's unpack these a little bit. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge, culture and history. So what you'll notice is that we have linked these into chapter 5 into Food Solutions 1 and 2 under the Indigenous Australian Food chapter, and also you'll find it under chapter 10 under food security. But the focus on this first section of the chapter, as Laurel sort of mentioned, was that it's about Indigenous food prior to European settlement, as outlined in the study design. Therefore, we've used the past tense, we've been writing about that, but it also is important that as we develop more knowledge ourselves about the rich culture of Australia's First Nations people, that we now start to bring in some more current examples. In Unit 1, Outcome 2, it does mention Victorians First People, but as Laurel said, the lines are blurred a little bit, and I think that we'll be probably giving a range of different examples that might come across all of Australian people. But really, it's a great way for our students to develop that deeper understanding about Australia's First Nations people, how food, cooking and food preparation is really, and practices, as well as the kinship and social sharing of meals, really developed their culture. When we're investigating those, it is often Indigenous and Torres Strait Island communities have their preferred education models, whether it's from a local, a regional, a state or a national perspective. So I think we'll have to focus on that as well, and put a bit of a focus on that. In terms of chapter 10, some very obvious examples are really linked here about improving food access to Aboriginal communities in the Northern Territory, the cost of food in remote and regional areas, and then of course, improving food security, food citizenship and the food sovereignty of First Nation peoples, which we have, as we've said, Laurel said that those 3 are interlinked. Thanks, Susanna. So food citizenship is, we're going to need to develop a really good understanding of this term. We've given you some examples there, but really it's the shared practice of encouraging food-related behaviours that support the development of a range of terms, democratic, socially and economically and environmentally sustainable food systems. It's an emerging movement, and it's encouraging us all to really think about ourselves as consumers and to take a more active role in shaping our food systems for people, animals and planet. And so it's going to be our responsibility to make sure our students are really clear on that their role and what their role is in the food system. Thanks, Susanna. Food security and food sovereignty. We are familiar with the concept of food security, and there are a number of clear definitions around there, but the definition that's used in our study design actually comes from a paper called Australia and Food Security in a Changing World, and it's a paper from the Prime Minister's Science and Engineering and Innovation Council from 2010, just making sure that you're clear on where that exact definitions come from. And note that this study design, when we're talking about food security, is actually added another dimension. So we're looking at availability, accessibility, acceptability, adequacy and stability as a focus, as the pillars that underpin food security for this study design. And then if we link back to food sovereignty, the concept of addressing the basic issues of food and hunger by challenging the control of food supply, large corporations, and it aims to give farmers and, again, First Nation people greater control of the decisions that affect their ability to produce ethical and sustainable food. So just, again, they are all interchanged with the food system. Thanks, Susanna. So we come to our little diagram of the food system. Again, very similar to what we're familiar with, and you'll see, as Laurel mentioned, that really this is a fundamental underpinning concept that we're going to be working with for the next few years. So in Unit 1 and 2, it's heavily focused on Chapter 9, and in Unit 3 and 4, we've got Chapter 7. So there are many different alliterations or diagrams of the food system, but these are the main points that we need to develop key knowledge and key skills around. Thank you, Susanna. Okay, healthy eating. So based on the Eat for Health program, which we know was developed by the National Health Medical Research Council, the Australian Dietary Guidelines, and as Laurel again picked up, linking that to the Guide to Healthy Eating. Now we know that these are under review, and we know that that information won't come out until 2024. But of course, we will keep you up to date in all of the changes that are made, but knowing that these definitely underpin our study, that healthy eating is the key factor that we're developing skills and key knowledge in. The practical activities that we've developed are all consistent with the recommendations of the Australian Dietary Guideline, and we've reviewed all of our recipes so that they are consistent with these messages that we're getting from the Australian Dietary Guidelines. Thanks, Susanna. Innovations and technology, and then of course this is the growing area. We're looking constantly in the papers, in all of the journal magazines, everywhere food teachers are looking, they're seeing changes, innovations, technology. And these are occurring at all stages of that food system diagram that we've shown you. You'll see that in the Unit 1 and 2 book, we've got examples in Chapter 9, 10 and 11, and in the Unit 3 and 4 book, Chapter 7, 10 and 11. And just down on the right-hand side of the slide, there are some examples there that will help you provide your students with examples. But again, we do know that this is an ever-changing things are being developed, innovated, technology. We just have to look at all the changes that have occurred in the last 2 years with COVID, with QR codes and imprints on food. So definitely that's going to be an area where we'll continue to update you on some of the new technologies as well. Issues in food, thanks, Susanna. So students in both year levels will need to explore and analyse contemporary issues relating to food supply and consumption of foods. So we've just given a few examples there, but there are many others in the book. These often relate to public scrutiny, government action and regulation. So for example, sugar taxes or climate change initiatives, those sorts of things. So students will work with these issues to make sure that they have a good understanding of those issues and how they're going to impact on the food system. They are looked under the headings of sustainability, legal issues, economic issues, psychological issues, the social, cultural issues that Laurel mentioned, health, political and ethical point of views. And really all of those issues are linked to families and how families and individuals will be able to access affordable food that's nutritious and cultural. Okay, so they're the key cross specifications. So you can see how they are going to flow through from Units 1 and 2 to 3 and 4, and will be linked to key knowledge and key skills. So how we apply those is going to be really important, but I think that we've covered it quite well in the text content for you. So now I'm going to hand over to Mel, who's going to take you through how we've approached the practical activities, which of course also underpin our study. So thank you, Mel.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I think I've missed a slide. Sorry, I've gone one too early, Mel. So the last one is sustainability for me. Sorry about that, folks. A wide range of contemporary issues that relate to sustainability and the supply of and consumption of foods are covered in both texts. And you can see, again, 3 chapters linked to those, and in units 3 and 4, we've got 6 chapters that link environmental, social and economic chapters. So it's definitely, these cross specifications are very well covered. So now, sorry, going a bit early, I'll hand over to Mel. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Susanna, next, thank you. I'm going to talk to you briefly today about applied practical activities that are incorporated through the new text. The reason being it will be relatively brief, only because if you have seen, we are going to do one of our future webinars in more detail about the applied practical activities. As you may know from already looking at your study design, they are found on page 12, and you can see the list on the right-hand side. So a lot of these activities obviously have been specified by VCAR, and it's a really important aspect to include within our study. I'm not sure about you, but I know that for me particularly, this is an area that my students absolutely love, and it's a really, really great way for students to apply and demonstrate the key knowledge and key skills in practical ways. So just looking down the right-hand side, we've got cooking, creating and responding to design briefs. When we talk about demonstrations, they are student demonstrations rather than a teacher-led demonstrations. Dietary analysis, nutritional analysis, product analysis, scientific experiments, sensory analysis and taste testing using focus groups and comparative food testing. So throughout all of our chapters, we do have a range of these activities because as specified in the study design, it is important that we use a range of these. And it also helps each of our students because they all learn different ways, and it's a great vehicle, I suppose, for some of the teaching and learning that can be done through our food studies, units 1 to 4. Next slide, please. This is just an example of one of our activities that we've got, and it's a quick comparison between 2 prepackaged Caesar salads, or it could be another commercial produced salad, linking into, in this particular one, it sits in about area of study 2, looking at social factors and perhaps the way in which they influence food choice and healthy eating. But within this applied practical activity, it also can draw in some understanding of some of the cross-study specifications. So if we look at that concept of healthy eating, food citizenship, food systems and sustainability. So I think our practical activities also enable us to incorporate a number of different, obviously key knowledge areas, but also some of those cross-study specifications. So they're designed to be incorporated quite easily into our teaching and learning program. I'm sure many of you are at, what are we in? I'm actually not even sure, week 6 or week 7 of the term, where it's incredibly busy with marking and assessment, and having some of these activities already prepared for us and at our fingertips is such a benefit to our teaching because we can pick them up and easily run with them. Next slide, please. Now, this is the opening of each of our chapters. So you can see that it's quite visually engaging for our students, and then offers our students on the right-hand side of that double spread layout some of the key terms that will be used within the chapter. Now, these key terms are also then highlighted throughout the chapter when they're being used to draw that focus back to them as well. Now, as a practicing teacher, one of the ways that I would probably incorporate in my teaching would be when I first start this particular chapter and explain which key knowledge points we're looking at to the students, we have a discussion around some of the imagery that we see in each of the double chapter spreads. So we might look at just a little bit of a brainstorm to see what we already know about some of these things that are pictured, or the language that's used on this double page. And I think as a teacher, it also gives, for me personally, it gives me a little bit of an insight into what my students may already know about some of these topics, and some areas that might be quite unfamiliar. So again, just it's a really visually appealing aspect of the text. And then at the end of that particular chapter, I often draw the students back to this graphic. So we might even then do a little mind map around one of the images. Okay, what do you remember that we've learnt around this particular issue? And I'm sure if anyone has used the current edition of the textbook, may have many different ways of using this infographic within their teaching and learning. But yes, definitely I use this quite a bit. Next page, please. So a few of the things that we've got within throughout the 1 to 4 textbooks, we're looking at different types of activities. So again, wanting to prepare our students as well, perhaps for assessment. If we look at some of the assessment that is recommended by VCA, we do look at a media analysis, we do look at case studies. So these that we've presented in the textbook can be used by our students to start to become more familiar with how they might go about utilising the information that they've learnt, and then looking at how they might tackle an analysis and some questions relating to that particular topic that they're talking about. Next slide. This is just a little example of a case study. So again, the students find these quite engaging because they're real life examples that broaden their understanding and link to lots of the concepts that they have been looking at. So that wider context of food production, food distribution, and food manufacturing. Again, also always linking back to our key knowledge that we're looking at, and again giving our students the opportunity to practice some of those analysis style questions. Next slide, please. Understanding the text. Now, sometimes my students might groan somewhat when they are given these to do, but I'd really highly suggest to them that these are such an important and critical part of really cementing the information and making sure they are comprehending the information that they've been learning. So they appear regularly throughout each chapter, and are kind of like a little bit of a checkpoint, I suppose, for the students to do some of these questions to check off their learning. So it's that really cementing in the knowledge before later on they start to then be able to apply what they already know. So with these questions, if you log into Nelson MindTap, which is the online component of the textbook, there are all the understanding the text questions do have formulated responses. So it's another way that students then also, instead of us having 30 questions to mark each chapter or 20, you can get the students to mark them themselves. Sometimes what I've done with these, if there's certain key knowledge points that I really want the students to focus on, I might, make a couple of them really compulsory, and they either do them as a homework task or submit them during the lesson. And sometimes I even use them as an exit card. So I choose one question that we've been learning in class. Their job before they leave class is to write on a piece of paper the response to that question, and then they can leave. So I can check for their understanding as well. Okay, next slide, thank you. Okay, so if you had tuned out to my last couple of slides, I suspect you might be drawn back in by the imagery now. There have been numerous new recipes added to both the Unit 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 textbooks. And I think between our author's family, our stylists can say that and even my students can say that these recipes have been extensively tested, because at the end of the day, we really want to ensure a successful outcome for our students and know that we can prepare these in the time that we have. If you even just look at some of the images, you'll notice that there's some on-trend sort of flavours, presentation, and definitely some on-trend recipes. And as Belinda said earlier, they all have been reviewed against the Australian Dietary Guidelines and the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, which I think is really important. And I don't know about you, but I suspect that in one of my first lessons, I often get the students to open their textbook and flick through the recipes, because this can be an aspect that really excites them, and just get them to have a look through the recipes, pick out their most favourite recipe, and see what kind of feedback we get from our students in relation to that. At the start of each recipe, when you get your copy of the textbook, or if you're familiar with the one at the moment, there is a little blurb at the top of each recipe that really sets the context for what that recipe is about. The other change that you'll notice, or if you're new to our textbook, you'll see that the recipes come at the end of each chapter. So they are really designed to incorporate those key knowledge and key skills that we've been teaching throughout that particular chapter of the textbook. Also too, I think every time we turn the news on at the moment, we're seeing, I think I saw about 3 news items this morning before I even left for work about the rising cost of something like an iceberg lettuce at $11. So I think also too, even just in these images, and perhaps even Susanna, if you want to go to the next slide, because I think there's some more on the next one. The cost involved to produce these recipes is not extravagant. So I think they're certainly doable in classes. And I think one of the other things we've incorporated in some of the recipes is have provided some alternative ingredients that you could be using. So they might be ingredients to cater for an intolerance, or it might be an allergy, or it might be a different source of protein that can be used within those recipes. So there's lots of flexibility in them as well. But yes, there's definitely some delicious ones. And I'm sorry that we are doing this at, well, probably afternoon tea time when we're all a little bit hungry, but it might give some inspiration for dinner tonight. Who knows? All right, next slide. Thanks, Susanna. In our Unit 1 and 2 book, at the end of each chapter, we have a section that is called Thinking Skills. So again, a series of questions that link back to the key knowledge based on Bloom's taxonomy. So giving the students an opportunity to have a look at higher order thinking questions within these as well. And also starting to prepare our students at year 11, or 10 and 11 if they're doing it early, into how to prepare for exams and the styles of questions that they might see. And I think I have one more. And in our 3 and 4 textbook. So this, one of these sections is new for the 5th edition, which is fantastic. And I think something that our students will really find beneficial. But we have also put, as well as preparing for exams, some questions where they apply knowledge, analyse information and evaluate concepts. We have also incorporated some examination style questions. So I think this really gives the students, again, another avenue and another resource to be using to start really honing in on those things like command terms within questions, the mark allocation for a particular question, and then being able to start to formulate responses. I know my students would love this. So the other thing for this particular edition is that the examination style questions have worked responses on the Nelson MindTap. So again, it could be a case of having, set those questions for homework, perhaps even if the students self-mark. Another activity I like to do, but you need to know your cohort a little bit with this, is get the students to actually swap their questions with someone that they trust and have them mark it, because I think that's also another really valuable way for that student to learn and look at what's in that question and whether their friend or peer should be awarded full marks for that question. So that's another exciting addition to the new textbook for next year. So there's lots and lots of activities. I think our students, and as busy teachers, we would be really appreciative of these. I know it's something that I have loved about the textbook, and even moving forward into the new textbook, having lots of opportunity to be able to utilise these activities with our students and really, prepare them and ensure that they're understanding all that key knowledge and key skills they need to by the end. But I think that's me done, and I'm over to Glenis. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. Well, you've heard quite a lot this afternoon about the benefits of the text in detail, and perhaps I'll just sum up by saying that these books have been trusted over, this is our 5th edition, and I think some of the reasons for that is that they've really been able to provide great confidence to students, because for one of the main reasons, the study design has been followed in a sequential order. And I think this gives students quite a lot of confidence. As others have mentioned, there's been considerable evidence-based research, and this has been undertaken in the production of the book. And this research, I'm sure, will ensure that there's going to be sufficient depth and detail in addressing the key knowledge. And this, of course, is vital because it'll enable students to be successful and feel supported in reaching their learning potential. Now, in support of the book, you've heard snippets of this along the way, but there will be online resources. And just quickly to sum up, we know that there are changes, massive changes in the food industry, and we want to keep you up to date. We want to keep our book alive. And with this online presence, we'll have the ability to update you with critical new information as it arises. And I think Belinda mentioned one example with the expected update of the Australian Dietary Guidelines and the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, which is expected in 2024. Now, other valuable online information will include the answers. Mel's just talked about those answers to the understanding the text questions and the worked examples of the examination style questions. These are valuable resources. Teachers are busy, and if students can then go and look at these answers, mark their own work, or as she suggested, swap with a friend, this provides an excellent resource. Now, some of you might be missing some of your favourite recipes in the new edition, but don't worry, we've put them online so you can still find them there. Now, the Nelson MindTap will contain additional web-based materials such as worksheets, but I think the Nelson team are going to talk to you about MindTap in a little more detail in a moment. There will also be links provided to external websites referred to in Food Solution texts, and this will be a very convenient way of finding access to these websites, both in the classroom and for students' homework. Now, we hope this session has been helpful and a very helpful start to this new study design, but we realise that we've got a lot more to tell you. So if we could look at the next slide, please, Susanna. We are going to run some additional sessions. In early August, we'll be running a session that will focus on practical activities across the units 1 to 4. Now, Mel gave us a taste today, but there's a lot more information we'd like to share with you about those practical activities. Our final sessions will be held in November for units 3 and 4 and early December for units 1 and 2. By then, we hope that you've got some time to be able to focus on perhaps the implementation of this study for 2023. And of course, you will need to have some curriculum documents and you will need to have some scope and sequence programs. Now, we're going to help with that, and we're going to run those 2 sessions in November and December, and they will focus on those scope and sequence programs. And I think that will be an enormous help to people when they're beginning to think about implementing this new study in 2023. And in the past, they've been able to be customised to your schools. So I think you'll find those sessions particularly useful. And we have separated them so that you may attend both, or if you're only teaching year 11 or year 12, you can make a choice. Now, I think at this point, I'd like to hand back to Jill. And Jill is the Cengage Learning and Sales consultant, or perhaps before that, I think, Carolyn, you'd like to speak to us. Am I right?
That's right, Glenis. Thank you. We just swapped around on you at the last minute. So, hi everyone. I'm the publisher of Food Solutions at Cengage. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Nelson MindTap, which is an exciting new product that we're going to be adding to the Food Solutions suite for this new edition. Sorry. Excuse me for a minute. So Nelson MindTap is an online learning space which puts you at the center. And Susanna, could you just pass on to the next slide? So Nelson MindTap for Food Solutions will include a page faithful e-text, online assessment, multimedia, student resources, and updates as required. And Glenis has already led beautifully into this. What I wanted to tell you about really is that idea of the currency of our text. So being able to respond to things that happen, new studies that are, new guidelines that emerge, etc. So this is really exciting for us as a team, actually, and as a publishing company, as a learning company. So teachers using Nelson MindTap can tailor content to different learning needs, assign directly to the student or to the whole class, can monitor progress using assessment tools like gradebook and reports, integrate content and assessment directly within your school's LMS for ease of access, access resources including videos, bonus recipes, worksheets, teaching plans, suggested answers to student book activities and exam questions, and as well as curated web links that Glenis has just talked to you about. So I think it's really that idea. I'm looking at your at the chat, and I can see there's lots of excitement about the opportunities that a more richer sort of digital offering can provide to you as teachers. So I'm madly taking down notes about some of the ideas that you've put up. We do have that flexibility, I think, now to be able to add to the resources and to respond to teacher and student needs too, which is fantastic. So watch this space. We're going to continue to sort of try and make this as rich a resource as we possibly can to support these amazing textbooks. So now over to you, Gillian.
Thanks, Caroline. So a huge thanks to Belinda, Glenis, Laurel, and Melanie too for walking us all through this new key curriculum changes with the new VCE food studies. I reckon you have addressed the cross-study specifications, you know, sort of changes to that key knowledges as well as key skills. And you know, those really interesting practical ideas all available in this new textbook. And as shared with Caroline, she's given us sort of an overview to Nelson MindTap. So all of the food solution products are available as a blended print or a digital product, or as digital only with Nelson MindTap. So just in terms of the pricing, the digital only is $49.95. The print and digital is $80.95. I just want to also, you know, sort of on behalf of the learning consultants, Susanna, if you can just flip that to the next one. Yep, great, thank you. So if you're keen to review the pages for this new edition, please do contact one of our three very friendly learning consultants, Anne-Marie Mosley, Kim Lowe, and myself, Jill. We would love to have a chat with you, you know, seeing how, you know, like 3/4 into the session and teachers were still coming forward. I know food tech teachers are equally friendly as we are. So yeah, really look forward to supporting you and your students with this new resource. So then I think you might want to have a look at these questions. Is that right? Or, yep. If you've got...
There's a couple in there. A lot of these are for the authors. So I can start with the first one. I'm not sure who wants to take it, but Leanne put in there for Unit 1.1 Outcome 2 Area of Study 2, which is the recontribution to health in Victoria's First Peoples. Could anyone just clarify this part of the dot point and its contribution to health? Anyone's take that one? There's also a couple more.
Perhaps, excuse me, sorry, perhaps if I just sorry, try and clarify that. It was really the way in which we've interpreted that is to consider the Australia's First Nations people when they were obtaining food and resources from the natural environment, how that related to their health and well-being. So the way in which we've interpreted that is that they did lead very healthy lives, but with the introduction of, when, I'm not sure what term to use now, whether it's an invasion or colonisation occurred, then their diet did change significantly. So that's the way we've looked at that aspect, and there is quite substantial information in the textbook, I think, to really clarify that for you. Glenis, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, that's exactly right, Laurel. We will probably, you want to put me up to me? We will supply that information. We will also look at the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating for Indigenous people as well, just to put that into perspective as well.
Thanks, Susanna.
That's all good. Oh, I'm not sure what's happened. No. Sorry, guys. Give me 2 seconds. Don't know why that did that. There's another question that says, are the key knowledge and skills included at the start of each chapter?
And again, at the moment, we haven't included those, and the rationale that we've decided on for not including them is that the study design has in the past been changed, and not necessarily in food studies, but certainly in health and human development, there have been changes to the study design. So we were very cognizant of the fact that if we print the key knowledge and key skills within the text, it can they may change in the future. So that was the reason that we haven't included them. And as they're quite easily accessible through the study design itself and on the VCEE website, we didn't know that that was necessarily something which was critical to the text when we had so many other important things to include.
There's a couple questions here. One asks, are there techniques within the books that don't meet dietary guidelines, such as creaming methods and so on? There's also another one, maybe if you want to answer them together, is there suggestions to make recipes vegetarian friendly, as there's a big cohort of their students who are vegetarian?
Yes, we have addressed that issue of a significant number of recipes that would be appropriate for students who are following a vegetarian or vegan diet, and we've made suggestions in quite a number of the recipes that relate to how the recipes can be adapted. And again, I think for many teachers, they will be quite experienced in doing that. So there are a lot of plant-based products that can be well used now that, for example, you would have seen the recipe on the screen for the Shanghai noodles. So obviously a plant-based product could be used instead of mince in those sorts of recipes. In relation to cake making and different methods of making foods that would be in the eating occasionally or in small amounts, I was just doing a review of our 3-4 book today, and there are 50 recipes across the entire text, and of those 50 recipes, there are only 7 that link to foods that should be considered to be discretionary foods. So yes, we have incorporated some recipes in the text that would be considered discretionary, but I think when you're looking at the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, they still fit within the model, and they're still permitted, but obviously only considered as foods which should be eaten just in small amounts or only sometimes. So that's why there is a reduced number of those within the actual text. But again, as I'm not sure whether it was Belinda or Mel was saying, some of the favourite recipes that didn't make the cut for the text will still be available on Nelson MindTap.
Would you like me to answer Dean's Asher's question about teacher toolkits? They definitely will still be running for teachers that have enjoyed those in the past. So yes, they will occur for units 1 and 3 and then 2 and 4.
Just having a look. There's another question in here that says, has there been any support material for teachers teaching units 1 to 4 together? And which units link most closely?
That's Ruth. I've been there. I know it's a challenge. We haven't done that, but I think maybe with this study design, it actually will be easier because of the cross-study specifications where things are, they're in both unit 1, 2, 3, and 4. So no, we haven't developed methods, but I think once students have an understanding, if you've got unit 1 and 3 together, you can be teaching the food system all together. You can be teaching healthy eating. So I don't know, has anyone got anything else to offer?
No.
It is a hard thing. Anyone that has to do it, I sympathise with you having had to do it a few times, but we haven't developed that, no.
Yeah. There weren't any other questions. You can pop them into the Q&A.
I think there's questions about the November, December workshops and maybe bringing them earlier with the scope and sequence charts a bit earlier, just because schools start their head start. I'm not sure about that one, about changing the timing.
I guess we could look at dates.
Yeah,
Sure, we can look at dates.
I think certainly as a practicing teacher, Mel and I realise that we're really crazy busy up until basically the end of term 3 and maybe the first couple of weeks of term 4 with our year 12s and getting our students ready for exams. So, we don't want to run these sessions when it's going to be difficult for you. But if that's certainly something that we're getting a feel for, we certainly try to be as reactive. We want this book to be something that will work for you as teachers. So certainly we can look at those.
And then I think, Caroline, if you just want to take the questions about Nelson MindTap and read aloud functions.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to offer that on the type of MindTap that will be coming with Food Solutions in its first iteration. But as I said earlier, there's quite a lot of questions that are relating to this, how we can use MindTap to support teachers and students. So it may be that something we'll have to take on notice, but at this stage, it won't be available for Food Solutions, I'm afraid, no. But it's a good point, actually, in terms of supporting less confident readers. I will say when we looking at the way we lay out the texts and look at the pages, we are very mindful of that visual literacy aspect to things, but also breaking up the text with subtitles, so chunking it up to try and support those students who are intimidated by a page full of text. So it is something we're very mindful in trying to use what we do have in terms of the layout and the design to really support students as best we can in that regard. The other MindTap, as I said earlier, I'm just taking note of some of these in terms of the recipes, downloadables, and that's all something that will go away and speak to everyone at the author team in the next week or so and see what we can do in the time that we have to make these things available in the first iteration. If not, it may be something that we look at doing early in the new year sort of thing. So it is something that we're going to keep live and keep working for you and try and make it, as I said earlier, as rich an experience as possible to support these amazing texts. So.
Thank you. I think that's all for the Q&A. The ones that are left in there have been answered. No, the chat. I think if there's any last minute questions, you can pop them into the Q&A. But I'd like to thank everyone for coming today and spending an hour of your time with us all. This has been great, and I love to see everyone talking to each other. This recording will be sent out kind of within a week. I know there was a couple of questions about slides. If they are available, we can send them with the recording. Otherwise, if there's no further questions, I just want to say thank you, everyone. And yes, so thanks, and I can end this here. But we look forward to seeing you all in the next PD, which will be early August. So, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Bye.